Plastids. Plastids are things like chloroplasts, and they're found in anything that's photosynthetic that's not a bacterial cell. So let's look at all living things. Let's look at life. If you look at living things, there are prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Plastids, like chloroplasts, are found in anything that's photosynthetic. There are certainly photosynthetic bacteria and there are certainly photosynthetic eukaryotes, but plastids have a membrane, and so there's no internal membranes in prokaryotes. So prokaryotes are going to have to do their photosynthesis in a different way. If you look at eukaryotes, there are four major types, at least in the system that we're looking at. There are animals and plants and fungi and protists. Animals do not do photosynthesis, and fungi do not do photosynthesis. So plants do, and they're eukaryotes, so they have plastids. And not all, but some protists are also photosynthetic, and so they would also have plastids. So we're looking at plants and some protists for organisms that have plastids, like chloroplasts. So these are major organelles that have membranes that are found in plants and photosynthetic protists, never in bacteria. So even though bacteria can be photosynthetic, they do not have any membranes inside of them. So they are, let me go backwards for a second here. They are so cool. Here's an original eukaryotic cell. We're talking about millions of years ago, actually billions of years ago. So here's the original eukaryotic cell, and here is an early photosynthetic bacterium, like a cyanobacterium. And this thing is going to eat it up. It's going to take it in, but it's actually not going to digest it like a eukaryotic cell generally would. So here's the bacterial cell, and what's finally going to happen is this bacterial cell is going to be inside of the bigger eukaryotic cell. Notice that there are two membranes. Bacteria have their own DNA, and of course this cell would have its own DNA, right? There's the nucleus. So you're going to keep the nucleus. And of course there's going to be a Golgi bodies, yay, and all that stuff. But one thing to notice is that this thing is going to have DNA, and it still does here, and it still does here. So these plastids still have their own DNA. So this is really strong evidence. They have ribosomes too. Really strong evidence that these chloroplasts evolved from single-celled, from bacteria forever ago, which is totally cool. So plastids have their own DNA and are believed to be descendants of cyanobacteria, or an early form of cyanobacteria, some type of photosynthetic bacterium, and cyanobacteria are just that, photosynthetic bacteria. Here are some types of plastids. There are chloroplasts, amyloplasts, and chromoplasts. Chloroplasts are the ones you need to know. You can put a star next to that maybe. These are the ones that are photosynthetic, and this is what we're going to spend our time on. It's interesting to note that there are other plastids, though, and they've lost that function of photosynthesis, or perhaps they've evolved from a different early bacterium. Am I not even recording? Drawings? No. Okay. So this is seriously like I think my 5th attempt at this video today because my kids keep bugging me. Okay, so some types of plastids. I want my recorder back though. There it is. Okay, so amyloplasts. You don't really need to spend a lot of time on these, except that we're going to be talking about them in lab, so that's why I'm introducing them. Do you remember back when we did the digestive system, there was an enzyme called amylase, and you know it's an enzyme because it ends in ase. This is an enzyme that breaks down starch. Well, this is a plastid, an organelle, that stores starch. Here's a plastid that has different colors in it, not just green. So chloroplasts are all green, but chromoplasts, chrome I think means color in some other language. Anyway, these can be all kinds of different colors. So we'll talk about those. So we'll talk about chloroplasts first, then a little bit on amyloplasts and chromoplasts. Chloroplasts are really important, and we're going to come back to them in a unit toward the end of the year when we do photosynthesis. So here are chloroplasts. Here's a cell, a plant cell. and pretend I drew that right over here. These green things right here are chloroplasts, and they have membranes. So they are found only in producers, plants and photosynthetic protists. There are some bacteria that are producers, but bacteria, they're prokaryotes, they never have internal membranes. So bacteria could, of course, never have these things because they have a membrane on them. They use energy from light. I have sunlight written here, but really it could be any type of light to make their own food in the process of photosynthesis. Chloroplast structure. It's important to notice the double membrane here. Remember when we said when a cell takes in another cell, there's going to be the outer membrane, which came from the eukaryote, and then the inner membrane, which came from the prokaryote. So here's the outer membrane, which evolved from the eukaryote, and then from the original eukaryotic cell membrane that brought it in. And then here is the stuff that's evolved from the prokaryote. And these things, you should memorize the names of these things. There are even more internal things here. So the membrane here from the bacterial cell invaginated in and formed these sacs. And a sac is called a thylakoid. And if you have a stack of those on top of each other, it's called granum. The cytoplasm of this organelle is called stroma. It's not really cytoplasm anymore. And I guess outer membrane here, inner membrane. So that structure is something you should memorize because we're going to come back to it toward the end of the year when we do photosynthesis. So chloroplasts are really cool because they have their own DNA and they have a pigment called chlorophyll. So you should know not only the word chloroplast, but you should also know chlorophyll for photosynthesis. They are never found in things that are not photosynthetic, so therefore they're never found in animals or fungi. And they're never found even in photosynthetic bacteria because bacteria don't have internal membranes. So look at all those membranes. That could never be inside a bacterial cell. So they're never found in bacterial cells. They are found in plants and they are found in many protists, but certainly not all. Amyloplasts. These are clear organelles. They make and store starch. And so if you think about, here's a plant, and down here it would actually have no chloroplasts, and up here it would have no amyloplasts. So these are leaves, and they do photosynthesis, and they make glucose, which I'm going to draw like this. They're supposed to be like little stop signs, but anyway, it'll take those and it'll transport them actually as disaccharides down here. And once the glucose gets to the roots, it's put together. And I'm trying to make a polymer here, starch, so a polysaccharide. And so this is starch. And so the starch is stored here over the winter. Over the winter, this part will die. Goodbye, plant. In the spring, the starch will be broken down into glucose, and it'll start to grow, and it'll make a shoot, and that will give it enough energy to make a shoot with leaves. And then the leaves will start doing photosynthesis, and a new plant can start growing. Yay, amyloplast. Crumbleplasts are kind of cool, so they're just colored things. I have them as red here, but they can certainly be pink or yellow or whatever. They make and store pigments, so they act as an attractant for pollinating animals. So for example, here's a flower. Something like that. Okay, so here's your flower, and flowers are always pretty. And the reason they're pretty, they can be purple or red or whatever, is so that a bug or whatever is pollinating it, a bee, will notice it, fly in to get the nectar inside. While it does that, it's going to pick up some pollen on itself, and then it'll go off and it'll find another flower from a different plant. So it'll go there, pick up some pollen, then it'll go to a totally different plant, come over here and pollinate that, and it'll get its nectar here, which is the reward for the bee, but it'll also move pollen from plant to plant so it can fertilize. Another thing that happens is the other colorful thing about plants can be berries or fruits, other kinds of fruits. So these chromatoplasts are necessary for seed dispersal. And so when plants eat colored fruits and then poop them far away, so for example, here's an apple and it's pretty, and an animal thinks it's delicious and eats it up. And the animal's not picky like us. It's gonna eat the seeds in here too. And then the animal's gonna walk a mile away, and it's going to poop it out, and there's the seed in there, and that'll grow up and become a new apple tree. Yay, apple tree. And so this apple tree won't have to compete with the tree over here that this apple came from. And that is the end of my story for now.